Welcome, everyone, to Metamorphosis Initiations, Thresholds, and the Alchemy of Becoming. I'm Kathleen, and today I'm here alongside my co weaver and beautiful collaborator, Vive. Welcome, Vive.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Kathleen.
We are devoted to reclaiming the sacred ways of meeting change, rooted in the wisdoms of our bodies, ancestors, universe, and our Mama Earth. We're curious about what becomes possible when we stay present long enough in the in between. Enough for new patterns, meanings, and futures to emerge. Today, Vive is our beautiful standing stone as we dive into the richness and beauty of this conversation with Stacy Dicker. Welcome, dear Stacy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm already so excited just hearing your description. This is amazing. Thank you.
Well, Stacy is a clinical psychologist who has worked with psychotherapy clients for over 20 years, and she taught upper level courses on eating disorders and adult psychotherapy at the University of Colorado Boulder for nearly a decade. In 2019, she published Psychstrology, Apply the Wisdom of the Cosmos to Gain Balance and Improve Your Relationships, which explores how the ancient archetypal wisdom of astrology can enrich modern psychological approaches to healing and self-understanding. And she later presented in a 2022 ACEP Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology Conference on increasing compassion through psychological astrology, advocating that contemporary psychology is out of balance and could greatly benefit from integrating timeless wisdom traditions to support our growth towards wholeness. Ancestral healing, including work with those across the veil, has also profoundly shaped her life. She's passionate about the intergenerational transformation that becomes possible when we embrace these expansive ways of knowing and repairing lineage wounds. In 2024, Stacey created, hosted, and produced Boundless Psyche, Timeless Soul, a global virtual conference featuring 22 deeply wise and heart centered speakers exploring the necessity of bringing a spiritual perspective to both individual and collective healing. And most recently, she became a Gene Keys guide and delights in the synchronicity that her radiance Gene Key is called Ancestral Reverence. She is deeply grateful for this transformative wisdom system, which empowers all of us to transmute our soul level shadows into the gifts always inherent within them. And so, Stacy, the title for today, Midlife as Initiation from Inheritance Towards Intimacy. So, before we get stuck into these questions, I know you have a beautiful poem to share with us.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Kathleen and I co-facilitate a group, and I love sharing poems at the beginning and end. I think it's such a beautiful way to meet at the same beautiful frequency. So both of these poems are about midlife. So this first one is a little bit shorter, and it is called Final Curve, and it was written by Langston Hughes.
Mm.
When you turn the corner and you run into yourself, then you know that you have turned all the corners that are left.
Mm. Oh my gosh, there's so much depth just within that short paragraph. Oh,
Thanks
and
for receiving that.
what a perfect launch pad into what it is about midlife. It makes it feel like something deeper is happening than just a life transition.
Yeah, the term transition is so like wimpy compared to what I think happens in midlife, and that's why it's an initiation. It really is like, what came before and what came after. It's your caterpillar to the butterfly analogy is perfect because there really is this before and after like that. And I think the thing about midlife that is the most um disorienting is that it doesn't feel like it's our choice. It feels like things are happening to us, even if we are acting and creating things, it's like the part of us that is the actor is not the part that we're used to living our lives from, which is our mind. I mean, that's really to simplify it. Um, it's like there's this whole other part of us that is trying to be born, and it requires such a massive reorganization, psychologically, spiritually. It's a really there's just such a powerful thing that is trying to happen through us. And Carl Jung is a really great person to look to for practical wisdom around midlife because he wrote a lot about midlife. He was very interested in midlife. And I love the way he described it. It's so simple. He said, "You're not young, but you're not yet old." Right? I mean, that's so ripe with possibility, right? Because you have the wisdom from the first half of life, hopefully. So here's where I think he had it's so simple, but it's so powerful that he thought that in the first half of life, we're all just trying to achieve the things and amass the things, meet the goals that were not all ours to begin with, right? Some of them came from our family, some of them come from society or culture, but at any rate, it's what starts to happen is that I think of it sometimes as like it's like your midlife meeting with your soul, because your soul, if your soul had all these ideas about what you were going to do in this life, and then you spend that whole first half, and this is not to, this is just what we do. This is the human experience that we do what we think we're supposed to do, but we end up really ignoring parts of us that were excluded for all kinds of reasons. Some of them come from us, some of them come, like I said, from our families or the cultures. But what happens is if those things are part of our essence, midlife is when our soul, or Jung called it the self with a capital S, is going to be trying to get our attention because there are things that we need to embody if we're gonna embody them. Because that second half of life is not going to last forever. That's part of what is, that part where you're not young anymore. That's part of that pressure of like, this is, that wisdom that you only have so long to become who you came here to be.
I'm going to pass it over to Viv in a moment because I know you're just humming away, humming away like I am, Viv. But what comes to me is just a travesty of our culture that when you hit 40, you are old. You're kind of ruined goods because your body's, unacceptable to modern standards. You are probably going to be called a psycho or, like it's just a travesty that this precious, sacred middle space like Jung describes is like stolen. It's like the stolen decade, decades of so much infinite potential. And it just makes me feel so sad.
Doesn't it just make sense though? I mean, as you're
Yeah.
saying that, it just seems like it makes so much sense because if there's so much power that could be, I mean, I'm not trying to be totally radical here, but I don't think our collective enjoys individuals being powerful in a way that's like from the inside out. I think we're not controllable. So sorry, Viv, to jump
Especially,
in.
especially the fierce, primal, feminine,
Exactly.
and that can be in a male body as well, like that primal fierceness that comes. Yeah, no,
Mm.
absolutely. Over to you, V.
Mm. Well, no, I mean, I'm so glad, Stacey, that you added that into what Kathleen was saying because that made me think, yeah, it's like the non-palatable kind of um, part of us at menopause where the kind of discernment and the caring less about what others think, like that power that emerges gets squashed because everything kind of becomes pathologized, doesn't it? It's like, oh, all this stuff's like you said, happening to me, and I need to try to fix it. And so we're at a point where, and it's as you were speaking, I was thinking about how I've heard people refer to, and I have myself, like this point where we're like, oh my God, I can't go back to how that was. It's like peeking it's like I looked under the hood, or I opened the box, or a dear friend of mine explained it as, like, she said, I'm like Humpty Dumpty. I fell off the wall and I'm split into all these pieces and I can't put myself back together the same way. And I was like, yeah, I feel that. And at that point where we're meant to be like finding a new way to piece ourselves back together, like you said, Stacey, that beautiful becoming, it's like there's almost like an encouragement to regress back into something before, which thwarts the becoming, that,
Mm.
and that feels like that tragedy that you were kind of talking about, Kathleen. It's like potential and becoming becomes pathologized, made wrong, needing to be fixed. Yeah.
Yep,
Mm.
exactly. There's a word that I kind of like, it came to me, you could say, because the word breakdown, I think, is something that is associated with this time. Psychologically and individually, we do tend to feel like things are breaking down. There's also this awakening component. So I love your Humpty Dumpty metaphor that your friend said, because I feel like it's like I've been thinking of it as like a breaking. Instead of a breaking or an awakening, it's like a breaking. It's both. It's a
Mm.
breakdown, but it's also there's awakening in that coming apart. And this is the last thing I'll say about this question, but when I think this is one of the reasons that Jung was so he was very realistic, but he also, I think, for a lot of us who love him, he brings a lot of hope. And you come away from his way of looking at things thinking, well, of course, everything needs to come apart. I mean, it was my first attempt to psychically organize, and it starts when we're so young. We're too young to filter through what's ours and what's not ours, and how we want to move through what's ours. And it's just anyway. So I think there's something really beautiful about it if you can see it that way.
Yeah, Kathleen, if I can, I meant to
Lee.
say when listening to you speak, Stacey, it's like it's a relief that just the first half of life is that dance in the world of making money and accumulating things and being kind of who you are via the influences of culture and family. And it's like a relief to kind of go, well, that's okay. That's just that's that stage, rather than thinking you should have figured it out sooner. And I think that a lot about working with younger people is like, well, all of their things that are in place sort of for a reason,
Mhm.
to protect them in some way, usually some kind of adaptive pattern that is to protect them. And we don't want to unravel that too soon. Not to say that working with kids, that we shouldn't work with kids and help them, but it's sort of that I'm holding that about kids, that, and so what you were saying makes so much sense, and it's a relief that it makes sense that that's that phase of life. Sorry, Kathleen, to just jump in there.
No.
And it's like you don't even need to do anything. Once it's happening from the inside. And so there really is something important about kids getting, and in that first half of life, us getting that sense of mastery in a certain way. It's like that's why this is so important when it does happen. This was something I was going to say later, but Viv, you just organically brought it into my mind. So Jung, a lot of people know about the Myers-Briggs, right? With the four Jungian, two women took Jung's four functions and made them into the Myers-Briggs. It wasn't him himself, but it's based on his typology. And so you have thinking and feeling and sensing and intuiting. Actually, Kathleen, an astrologer and Jungian analyst, Liz Green, actually mapped them onto the four elements, the astrological
Oh,
elements.
wow.
The four. those four things. But anyway, so in midlife, what happens? So when the first half of life, we organize in terms of our favored ones are up at the top and we use them the most. And then what starts to happen in midlife, there's something Jung called, well, it wasn't his word, but he spoke about it. It's a term called enantiodromia, and it's the tendency of something to turn into its opposite. It's like an
Mm.
archetypal movement. And so what starts to happen is that very naturally, the need for those two bottom functions to become more usable, and sort of grown up enough to rely on it sort of naturally happens in midlife. And so that's what I would say. I think for kids, there's only so much, um, certainly there's its own movement of becoming whole even as we're younger, but there is something about midlife that really, like, it just happens to us, and yeah, it's really, honestly, I think the most we can do for anyone we love who's going through anything midlife related is it just needs a lot of space and a lot of tenderness. And Vive, exactly what you said, it is not your fault. We beat ourselves up so much. You can only imagine as a therapist. The way I had organized the first half of my life was so unsustainable, and I didn't realize it. And yeah, I thought I had messed up so much, and it's just turns out it's what we're here to do. Good old Earth School.
And I just want to, before we get into the next question, I just want to say that word again, breakening. Was that what you said? Like, boom, I love that. That feels like a reclamation in itself. So let's just emphasize breakening. It sounds empowering. And so, Stacey, speak about inheritance in a way that goes beyond just family background. What do you mean by that?
So I've already kind of started referring to this a little bit, but if you think of your inheritance as what you, what was sort of what you came into in a way. So I mean that from multiple levels, from kind of smaller to bigger. So first of all, in terms of your chart, um, the inheritance aspect of our planetary placements, you could say, you could think of the shadows as being part of that inheritance. When we get our specific, when we and astrologers all say you pick your chart. I totally agree with that. But that when we, so on an individual level, even our chart is a form of inheritance that we then have an opportunity to work with. So that's kind of the first level, that when I'm thinking about transmuting something from the inheritance as being the starting place. Family stuff, certainly. I mean, as a therapist, that's a huge, like, family dynamics, unprocessed grief, unfinished business, family patterns. Those kinds of things didn't start with us. And a lot of the time, so this is another layer out of what I mean. A lot of the time, there's an ancestral lineage component to what we're dealing with. I would say it's probably always there. We may not always know about it, but nothing started with us. We came into a huge system. I think of it like a tapestry, and we have so many ancestors. You have like 64 fourth grade grandparents or something like that. And like they're still really pretty well related to you. So you can imagine, I mean, if you think of each of those people as having not finished everything in life, like we're all just, we kind of pick up the knitting sticks, and I don't even knit, but we start working on our corner of it. And then when someone dies, there are a whole bunch of threads of unfinished business, and then the next person comes in. And so we are uniquely or inheritors of all the unfinished business that is ours to transmute. So there's that whole level. Then there's also this whole cultural level and historical level of all the unfinished business of things that have happened. And epigenetics was made into, like, the understanding that we have of it started with Holocaust survivors, the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. So things like that, like historical events and cultural events that people have lived through. Those things live on in us. And then there's also even the collective level. As a human family, there is so much that we have inherited that we're all dealing with collectively. And I think that there's something about understanding what is uniquely ours to work with that I think we can, so often we're so mired in shame and in guilt and in inferiority and feeling wrong for things that, like I said, they weren't like they were our doing. And there is something about when we can really appreciate what is actually ours, there is something so like that's how we can work with it in a way that is responsible, really responsible, and like meaningfully working to transmute it. It takes really understanding all that webbing. I mean, that's so much of my early experience as a psychologist. I did not appreciate the intergenerational and ancestral and cultural and historical contexts in the way that I came to over decades of doing it. And I just think, I mean, that's part of our training actually, is to see ourselves as so separate and the architects of our destiny and all that stuff. And anyway, it's nowhere near that simple. And it turns out that if we're really going to do something meaningful with our pieces, we have to really understand much more clearly where what all this stuff even is and where we're starting from. So that's what I mean.
Wow, so much richness there. But two things that really I picked up on were those threads and that metaphor of I'm just envisaging this beautiful patchwork quilt that each of our ancestors have been sewing a patch, but then we take the threads and we do the best to become the weaver. And sometimes there may be a piece of patchwork that is like has so much left to do. And another time there may be a patchwork that is just needs a couple more adjustments. I just find that so beautiful. And also it piqued my interest when you said the 64. Because as we know, 64 is a number of archetypes within the gene keys. So just think, oh, there's another little juicy thread there to dive in as well. And I'm going to pass it to Vive, passing you the thread now, Vive.
Yeah, the 64 caught my attention too, because it was like, whoa, okay, there's like 64 kind of somewhat close ancestors that I don't know. And immediately I felt that sense of connection, the way that you talked about the tapestry, and just to remark, because something Kathleen and I've noticed through these conversations is this reoccurring kind of metaphors and imagery that seem to keep coming up, because we were speaking with Perdita and she was talking about the spider's web, and I thought of the spider web and the pulling, the way she talked about pulling the thread. The same feeling came in when you were talking about these loose threads, like that there's always loose threads at the end of a life. There's always something to work with. That invitation by itself is like, oh, wow. I I feel like something expands behind me just hearing you say that. Like it, yeah, it's incredible. So thank you so much for that, sharing that. That really, it has a sense of kind of, like you say, with therapy being traditionally quite individual focused, it's like it opens it up to a belonging and an understanding of self, but in this greater, wider context that feels nurturing and held and nourishing, a lot like what we were speaking about with Perdita, the many mothers, including the earth. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay. Not to forget all of these threads that could be somehow worked with as this individual in the now. So thank you, Stacey. That's just beautiful.
Your imagery is so beautiful. That was so moving to hear where you went inside. That's, yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
Mm. And so let's now move to relationships, as you were just saying, the individual, why do these changes affect us in relationships or relationships? Why do they matter in this time?
Well, so I love this question because again, Jung, again, I think just so practical. Because when you hit midlife, again, your brain, things aren't making sense the way you thought. And so having things like this that help it make sense actually really does help quell some of this anxiety. So Jung talked a lot about projection. That was one of the most base level things that he saw everywhere, that we project everything out, and as we mature, we withdraw our projections and bring them inside. And so when we are seeking partners in relationship, one of the ways that that shows up is that we seek people who balance us out. And another way of saying that is that opposites attract. So you can see this in the typology, as I was talking about before, that like, I'm my strongest functions are feeling and intuiting, and I married someone whose strongest functions are thinking and sensing, and that's a really common um, thing that we marry people who show the opposite strengths because our psyche can unconsciously feel that and is oriented towards wholeness. So relationships are where so much of this stuff plays out. They are like the crucibles for so much of this midlife stuff because, the classic midlife crisis, as people talk about it, is there's so much projection out. You get to this point where nothing feels like you thought. The things that you thought would make you happy feel like at best, they don't make you happy. At worst, they feel like chains. And so you're basically looking at the other person as you're trying to make sense of this at the beginning of the whole midlife experience, let's say. And what is supposed to happen, what is ideal, and this is, Richard Rudd in the Venus sequence points us in this exact same way, is that we're supposed to look inside because all those things, like I was saying already, all that stuff that's happening, all the dissatisfaction, all the feeling not good enough, feeling like we did stuff wrong. I mean, so much of the time, Viv, you were saying that before, like you feel like you did something wrong. The younger half of life, we're like not dealing with that well. We're more apt to look to someone to blame or, try and just not see it that way. But that is actually what, even though it's happening in relationship, because it really is the relationship that becomes the stage where we can see a lot of this stuff. A lot of it's not seeable unless it's, that you're in that chamber where the work can happen. And so, yeah, it's basically like we're seeking wholeness unconsciously. Our partners are doing the same thing. This is part of why it's so gnarly. Frequently, we're both in that midlife. I mean, midlife is a long range of years. Um, and so it's really, really difficult to disentangle, each person's soul's longings that, by the way, none of this comes out in ways that are like, maybe not none. Maybe there's a certain amount that comes out in ways that are like, oh, there's an idea, like a dream that comes. I had one of those, but so much of it, you guys, I'm making it sound like it's just this thing that, like, here, why don't you think about this? It's not. It's like health problem. I got breast cancer. Tons of people end up with something like their bodies have been holding all this stuff. And in midlife is when the bill gets shown to you. So anyway, I think the most helpful thing, especially as far as our relationships go, I'll speak to this relational piece right now because I think there are a lot of things that are helpful, but um, the relational piece that's helpful is to remember this is not a relational issue. It's an intrapsychic issue that is playing out in relationships. That's the thing. And it's really hard to keep that stuff straight, especially in midlife.
Faith, I'm gonna pass.
Yeah, I'm like, so the thought I had then, and it's something that I experienced, but I also hear this a lot working with women in midlife, is, and tell me if I'm on the right track here, Stacey, but it feels related, is in midlife when that insight happens, like I can't go back, there is so much fear relationally about what might happen to the people I'm in relationship with, to my kids, to anyone, if I continue to wander into this, like, who am I becoming? If I entertain, who am I becoming? Like, it's really, and I remember also even in some of the things I was reading, because I sort of began my journey with Bill Plotkin's work with Wild Mind and Nature and the Human Soul. And not that there's lots of stories in that, but there's sort of stories that are outside of that that are like when you start this, like, and it's a truth, you can't be sure of what will happen. So almost there's a fear to go into the exploration in case something breaks down in relationship. And it's almost, there's, does that make sense? It's like it's such a big fear that I think might stop us from going there, from under sort of trying to listen to what soul is trying to tell us or what life is trying to tell us about the what next. Because what if someone suffers when I do that? As a mum, that was a really big fear and question that I kind of held through the process and in relationship.
So beautiful. I mean, I think the sensitivity with which you hold that is the most important thing because I don't think that there are any answers. It's more about seeing it and holding it. And I think that, a dear woman once said, no matter what you do with your child, if you, let's say somebody's trying to decide if they're going to stay in a marriage or leave a marriage. And she said, if you stay, it's a teaching moment. If you leave, it's a teaching moment. So there is something about that midlife experience that, I had several dreams. We were talking about dreams before we started recording. So one dream that came to my mind as you were describing that is I had a dream. I was driving in an area, and this was totally midlife. This was related to I got divorced. And I was driving and I was thought I knew where I was. And then all of a sudden I was in a really different place and the road was like one street or one side of the highway separated from the other and it had like a chain link fence and I couldn't get back on anywhere where I knew. And this voice came and said, that's the difference between a highway and a pass. You can't get off the pass until you're on the other side of it. That's what I woke up with. Right. And that reminds me so much of what you're saying. The other dream fragment that I had that I was going to say today, because it's just so related to what you're talking about. I woke up, this was also very midlife. These dreams were like 10 years apart, which tells you how long this cycle actually lasts. Kathleen knows there's, multiple astrological transits that are like layered on top of each other and they're not over before the next one's starting. So, but anyway, this dream fragment, the only thing I woke up with was a voice asked me, who are you here for? That was the question. Who are you here for? And the reason this comes to mind as you're describing that about being a mom, I mean, I think, for all you moms, the universe knows that you're moms. It's not trying to, it doesn't have to be so black and white. This is your life too. And you're modeling how someone moves through this radical, radical psychic reorganization. I mean, it's crazy. it's crazy. I left a voice message for Kathleen this morning. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize the moon was going to be in Pisces when we were recording. This stuff is so tender. But I mean, it's really so tender. This is really, really scary. I think the more you can just see this as an archetypal process that happens to every single one of us. And it really is an initiation into a way of listening for deeper messages than the ones that we'd been attuning to all those years.
Yeah. Kathleen, if I'll share one more thing, but one of the big insights that came at that time when I was, diving into this work was because my partner is not into this at all, and I was thinking, oh gosh, what does this mean? What does this mean? The big insight was, well, that's okay. He has his creative things. He builds things. He loves to do that. That's his world. And I can have mine. And that doesn't mean we can't work together. We don't have to have all these shared, heaps of shared interests. We actually have the relationship that is the shared interest. And it was really helpful to sort of for that expectation to be kind of dropped and for me to be in regard and respect of what it is that he loves to do, what brings him to life and what brings me to life. And that actually, if we're both doing things that bring us to life, something of that is part of what nurtures the relationship. So that was like the big kind of insight that just held me through the changes in the process.
That is so beautiful and
Mm.
so wise. And yeah, I love that the relationship is the shared stuff, and that to because if you think of it in like that first half, second half way of like where you were drawn to each other before the changing started to happen. And so if you can just trust that those points are going to stay, and maybe that's not the case for everyone, but I definitely think that starting with that framework, I mean, God, that is so beautiful. That's like, giving your garden the most beautiful chance to grow everything you want it to grow. So I love that.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Phoebe. We seem to mirror each other. So, because my husband is the same on a surface level, you'd say he doesn't have a spiritual bone in his body, except he loves the new moons and he think full moons. He loves full moons, and he has this love language of like for an anniversary planting the macrocarpet so that in 20 years he can build beautiful furniture. And I'm like, is that not spiritual? So. And I love V that you say that, like the relationship is the shared interest. And then Stacey, just when you were sharing about the mums, that was so touching and just makes me feel why astrology is so important. Because say for as a mum, for example, I have a North Node in Cancer, which means as a mama, I'm really here to step into this nurturing mothering, caring role, which is not so familiar to me because I have a South Node in Capricorn, which is the opposite, not in a bad way, but I mean, you have many Cap qualities to speak to. But whereas mum, who is here as a North Node in Leo, is here to like be that shining bright star who dresses everyone up. There's all these different flavors as a mum that we come with, and and the invitation is to be the mum that you've come here to be, not who society deems you have to be a good mum. So it's such important conversations. And this just brings me to the next question of what needs to be surrendered, Stacey, in order for this becoming to emerge.
So I think the answer that comes to my mind first is about our our thoughts about and the attachments that all those thoughts have brought about who we thought we would be, about what we thought it would feel like, I mean, when I think that that is so much of when we're resisting allowing things to turn in the way they organically want to, I think so much of that is certainly there's a lot of fear about the unknown and the things coming apart. But I think there is also this like you really are forced, and this is part of why I think it really pulls this maturity out of us, is like you really are forced to somehow hold this you're feeling like things need to change, or you're not feeling it, it's happening through you, but things are changing so much that you're not like you can't yet trust what you're becoming, but you also can't trust what you can't trust your same thinking process. And so that's why I'm saying I think that's what needs to be surrendered. When I was thinking about when I, as a therapist, especially, I mean, I just thought I could handle everything. And eventually it was so like stark, the realization that I couldn't. It wasn't just like, I think it was like, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? I mean, that's such a like, and I'm still a therapist, and I actually still really love being a therapist. So it's not so simple. Like I was saying before, it's not so simple like new job, new partner, new anything. It's not, it's more like new relationship to life because and to yourself, because the way that that happened to all of us is that we were not, I mean, it's not our fault. We were not taught to orient to our inner lives. And, you know, I mean, the fact that any of us get there in midlife is kind of amazing when you think about it. But it's the power of the feminine, honestly. It's like, because I really do think as gnarly as it gets, health problems, marriages imploding, loss of jobs, all kinds of stuff, arrests, all kinds of stuff. But if you can think of it as yourself, capital S self or soul, is orchestrating this for your growth, for your wholeness, for you to be shaking loose of some of this stuff that's not authentic. That's one of the big drives. There are two really big drives that I think show up in us in midlife. One of them is for authenticity. Everything that doesn't feel real is just, it feels like it can't stay. Like literally can't stay. It's sort of like that's the part about where it's not even our choice in a certain way. The other thing that I think is really kind of a universal arc is this drive toward simplicity, because we amass so much stuff and we have so many things going on that we literally can't even think straight. My life, the metaphor I always used for my midlife crisis, if you will, was I felt like a snow globe. I felt like myself had fragmented into 1,000 pieces, and I couldn't even think straight. I couldn't even like get a read anymore. It was just so anyway, um, that's what I would say. It's really mostly about our minds and what we thought things would feel like. And I hold that with real tenderness, because that grief is very real, very real.
Just making me feel as well about this conversation with Perdita that we had about, and just going back to your bio as well, Stacey, of working beyond the veils has helped you, and just realizing that we're not alone, and that it can feel so lonely. But as Perdita says, we have so much love from all of our mothers and grandmothers and teachers and anyone from beyond, who's our loved ones in spirit, or people who we may have met and they just made a fleeting influence, and like they're there and we can call upon them to come in and help us, that we don't have to do it alone. And I think this is so sacred and poignant, um, that we realize this.
I couldn't agree more. And it's that the way that it shows up that really brings that about in its own unique way. You can't like, there's no prescription for how it unfolds, but for each of us, there's a way that there is some opportunity to realize that connection to something bigger. And Viv, you were speaking to it too. I mean, it really, Jung, again, Jung was huge on this. Jung was, one of his quotes that I love so much, and I feel like it's such a midlife quote, is the decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? That is the telling question of his life. And I think midlife is when that kind of stuff, if it's going to seep in, midlife is when, you know, I don't know if the veil, I don't know, it's just there's some ability to access. I think because we're on our knees. We're really like we realize that we don't know all we thought we knew.
And this actually sparks for me when we come into our 40s, we're in our Neptune's square. And Neptune is the planet of spirituality and beyond the realms and into that infinite possibility of magic and all of this. And also what you spoke about, the fog, like Neptune is also very connected to disillusionment of like not being able to see because we've been asked to see beyond what our physical eyes are trained to. So it's like when we can have an understanding that we actually have these planets here for us that are not here to punish us, but they're here to actually help us melt into that goo to become all that we were meant to be. And I'm going to pass it to you, V. But yeah, it's just
Well, the melting was what I was thinking of too, Kathleen. Like that when Stacey, when you were talking about the thinking function, kind of like it is sort of melting in itself during this period where the thoughts you can't that they're like even for me listening to you trying to hold on to the thoughts that are coming in, they're all like fighting in my head, like me, and I'm like, oh, hang on, and so I know that experience well of the melting of the thoughts and really so, but then as you were saying that, I was thinking about how you were talking about the reversal of the functions. It's almost like the thoughts do need to, it's there's a gift in the thoughts melting. I'm sure it doesn't feel like a gift. It doesn't feel like a gift to me at times because something else can come through when something is melting. So I felt that kind of, oh, that's right. So if we have this understanding, oh, when my brain is not working how it used to, it's actually providing the environment for something else to emerge. That brings a different way of relating with what's happening to us in that moment, I think. And the other thought that I had as you were speaking was when this way of being kind of shifts post menopause or even during menopause, coming back to like that discernment and that need actually for those women menopausal women in culture and that way of being for younger women, like that there's actually a reason that women physiologically go through this process in that wider, like you're saying, that wider sense to have powerful women of discernment. And I, sorry that I'm going to swear, but giving less fucks about things is, and having that, because in that mother stage, there isn't so much of that, but bringing that into the wider culture, into the community for the younger women too, to see being modeled and not being made wrong to be that way. Because, as in fairy tales and everything, it's been so demonized, the Baba Yagas and the crones, and but actually to revere and have regard for that is like, you know, yes, I wish and I hope for my kids that there's maybe a different regard for that stage of life that's not pathologized or being made to no longer be of use or the way that older women have been, I think, in Western, Anglo-Western culture anyway. Um, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you're doing so much work. I mean, both of you are doing so much work in that regard, and so many other people too. I feel like this is right. Like this is what, because it is about, I think, and I think you guys would agree with this, the feminine principle. This is not about men versus women because all men have feminine, they have an inner feminine, just like we
Mm.
have, women have an inner masculine. So it's not about the bodies people are born into. It's about the value system that is associated with the patriarchal divine masculine. It's not bad, it's just so tilted out of balance. And so the stuff that you are speaking to, and I loved how you were talking about thoughts dissolving, and because I do think that it's like the divine feminine, it's so much deeper than the thinking process. I will say though, depending on where that function is for you. So for me, that was my lowest function. And in midlife, I was able to have certain thoughts that were really clear that I needed to have that I couldn't have before, like breaking through the fog kind of thoughts. So anyway, it's sort of like the nature of the thinking, I think, is like I started to go from having this like immature thinking function to a deep, like wise old man thinking function that I could access at times. Um, yeah. So anyway, I love everything you said because I think how you're holding this is part of how we are, we're bringing, there's a Jung quote I was going to read later, but I'll read it to you now. I love it so much. This quote is I know I've said a lot of Jung quotes. This one's my favorite. It's my email signature quote. And I think I have it memorized, but I don't want to botch it, but I'll try and do it from memory. He says, in our most private and most subjective lives, we are not just the passive witnesses or sufferers of our age. We are also its makers. We make our own epoch. And I see you guys doing that. That's what I'm saying is, with your own kids, that's the thing, is the private and subjective lives is the key part. Jung was all about that we do our own individual work, but we're doing it for the collective. We're doing our own pieces of the collective work. And certainly the work that parents do with their kids, it's, some of the most sacred work on the planet. So anyway, I just wanted to say I love everything you're saying is just like, it's so nourishing to me to hear you moving through things that are really hard. You're making it sound easy because you're bringing such beauty and trust. I think trust, that's the other thing I want to make sure I say, that I think trust is a really important part of this. And I think we would all do so much better if we could work on that, because all of our ancestors, had stuff that made it hard to trust. And, it's there's so much work that each of us individually have to do on that, because there's so many, it's just so easy to fall into not trusting. And yeah, so anyway.
And and what becomes possible when we trust, Stacy?
Oh, it's so beautiful, Kathleen. I mean, that's the best to ask me that right now. I mean, what happens is that then life can live through us.
Mm,
Our own selves can live through us, because
mm,
we can get in the way if we don't realize that we can get in the way. And so, Viv, I think you used the word relief before. I think if we can trust that this process it's archetypal, it is life that is trying to happen through us. It's our unlived life coming to the surface for us to be able to live it. I mean, it's so powerful. So I do think that if we can do it, we develop a whole different way of being with ourselves, being with each other, and being stewards of our planet.
mm. Stewards of the epoch, of the epoch.
Mm.
And just before we get into your beautiful free gift, Stacey, um, one of our beloved speakers, Suzanne Weed, she talks about like when you're starting, or in this phase before you go into the um cocoon and the goo and all of that, to get a butterfly collection. And she said the butterflies are the butterflies are the ones who have been through the goo and all of that and emerged. And I just wanted to say you were a butterfly to me, Stacey. So thank you.
Oh, Kathleen, there are no words for how honored I feel to hear that from you. Thank you so much. My God, so beautiful.
Mm.
And you just made me realize I forgot to say something. There's a compliment that I want to give you through Vive and connect with Vive on this. So, Vive, the very first time I ever saw you, you were in conversation with Kathleen, and I heard you say something like, I hope I don't totally botch your words, but you said something like Kathleen was the person who um, sort of introduced you to the joy of collaboration. And
Mm.
I would completely second that. This woman has such a special way of making it feel safe and fun, and like it's like true partnership where everything seems more tackleable because you've got each other and you trust each other, and she just has made the process of collaboration so beautiful. And I heard you say that and I was like, I already feel connected to you. So anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think working with Kathleen and being a co-weaver and a collaborator, and I think I've said this to you, Kathleen, has healed I think a sister wound I didn't even realize I had until we worked together, and I was like, wow. And I'm lucky that I also get to work with one of my best friends in another venture as well. And it's so incredible working with other people in this collaborative, co-creative way. I think, as I'm saying that, it makes me think back to what you were saying about the tapestry. And it's like co-weaving and collaboration is where we feel held, but it's also how we can trust. Like we're learning to trust and trust in being held by the tapestry, the ancestral tapestry, and the world, the greater world around us. And like you said, Stacey, I was really touched by what you said about this sort of relationship to self also being somehow connected to relationship with the world as well. And I was just sharing that the other day with a client that, when I moved down here, I was really afraid of wasps, and I thought I was really cool running through the bush, but then as soon as I heard something, I like sprinted as fast as I possibly could. And so much has changed in terms of my relationship. Like Kathleen and I talk about not swatting flies, because the flies from bring their own kind of medicine, but a
Mm.
wasp flew in here and just landed on this shell and it just cleaned itself the other day. And I was like, so delighted to have its company for the few seconds that it was there. And, I was like, wow. So what was once uh, like so filled with fear and like these things needed to be removed is also reflected in how I feel about myself. And so this relationship to nature and the world around me being reflective of how it feels to be in my own body. That's what I thought of as I was listening to you speak to that. And it's like, oh, when there isn't an enemy, when it's not my enemy, these things, and there's not an enemy inside either, there's a whole different way of being.
That was so beautiful. There are two things I want to say that are so beautiful. So, first of all, I just want to second, you're so right. It is a deep wound that this is a corrective experience with. And that's so not small that when you have this experience of collaboration, that feels so joy filled and safe and nourishing. And then you can see sides of yourself that you couldn't see before. You could see sides of the universe show up for you and other people and their gorgeousness. It is so deeply corrective. So I want to, highlighted that so perfectly. And I just, yes, absolutely, positively. Um, and then what was the other thing you just shared? It was so rich too. What was
Oh,
the
I
last
was
thing?
just talking about that relation to the relationship to like the changing relationship to
Nature.
these things, like that perhaps once felt like an enemy, and how that is also somehow being reflected or has changed in me as well. And it's just, yeah, like it's a relief as well. And there's an ease, I was thinking as you were saying that, that comes in, and like there's an ease working with Kathleen where uh, there is such, Kathleen, you can correct me here if I'm speaking for both of us, but there is such trust that lives in relating. And it doesn't mean that we can't disagree on something or say, oh no, this is really important to me. But in that, there's this real sense of what I need to speak up for, or where I can just like, that's not, doesn't actually matter to me, or this really brings me to life, and a complimenting of what one of us loves to do that the other doesn't so much. And it's been such a beautiful experience to be creating that way.
Mm. I know
I
there's
remember. Go, Kathleen,
No,
go, go.
I was just going to say that I know there's a quote that you very much love too, Stacey. Easy is right. That's just what came to me. And then just this visual of that tapestry of this big patchwork cloak or this patchwork blanket. And instead of us all just working on our own patch and, oh, mine's prettier than her, but it's like we come together and there may be some patches that are tattered, but we each come in and then we create something that's beautiful and new and unique through our own different colored threads and different patterns. That's, yeah, just such
And
an
we
expensive
help each
thought.
other.
Mm,
When you were saying like the parts that are more tattered, I mean, we help hold each other up. We help shore each other up and teach each other in our own ways. We hold each other and we model for each other, and it's so collaborative and beautiful as opposed to this like hoarding of mine. And it's and again, I just can't say enough. I mean, my nervous system is what came back to that comment, Vive, is it's so powerful how deeply wired that fear energy or competition or like it's not going to work or it's not going to be comfortable or I'm not going to have space or be seen or I all the things that are in there. And when you have someone who has, I mean, because Kathleen, let's be honest, you've done so much work on yourself. You didn't just happen into being who you are. You have worked really hard to alchemize your own prima materia, which is what Jung called the shadow material. So anyway, it's so not small. That's why I wanted to speak to it. It's so not small, and it's the gift that keeps on giving, because the more you can let yourself do it. I mean, Kathleen knows my gene keys are very, I mean, for a lot of us, but I have some really mental ones, some really like, brain focused ones. And when we do our thing together, it's like we both just sort of like trust and let go of the reins. And it's only through doing that that the gorgeousness, I mean, the things that people share are just like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I get to be here with all these souls who are, this is what's emerging out of them. It's just like beauty, 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 beauty. And if you're in the way, none of that unfolds that way. So it's like, it's so much easier on everything. It's easier on us, and it's easier like life can happen through us, you
mm,
know? And Viv, the thing I was wanted to speak to you about your share before, so beautiful how in nature you gave wasps the opportunity to become something different to you. Again, this stuff doesn't just happen to us. There has to be an openness to see things differently and experience things differently. And I just think that's such another beautiful example of what, something that seems, and this is why it's so idiosyncratic to us. People in therapy all the time will be like, this seems so small, but it's so important to me. And it's like, well, yeah, that's how it is for all of us. Everything that's important to us could be seen as small, but it's our own individual. I don't even want to say it's our transmutation because that makes it sound like it's just all us. It's our being able to trust enough and participate in that way because there is a willingness. You can't just be passive and like, well, because that not choosing. Jung has another famous quote that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So not deciding is that's it. We've got to be active participants with that openness and allowingness. And anyway, I think it's so beautiful that you are that person for both of us, and that Viva, I heard you say that the very first time I ever heard you talk, and so I just thought it was such a beautiful synchronicity that I feel the exact same way.
Mm.
Well, I feel all juicy and held.
Good.
And so, with that, because I heard you allude to beauty, this is a beautiful lead in to your free gift, Stacey. Would you like to tell us about it?
Yes, well, can I call it our free gift?
Yes.
Um, so Kathleen and I are going to co-lead a gathering that should be quite beautiful. That's one of the biggest intentions that we have for it. And it is called Gathering in the Field of Venus. And in this gathering, we want to invite you to come into our space. So we've just been talking about this beautiful space that we so enjoy being in. We want to give you, if any of you are interested in maybe learning more about the Venus sequence, and potentially traveling through that sequence with us, we would love to guide you. It's a deeply powerful sequence. So I would imagine that in that gathering, if there's any content that's shared, it would only be around the experience of that sequence. And I think it would be very valuable actually to share personal experiences because you really can't quite understand it without that experiential layer. It's just way deeper than if you just read about it.
And for those who aren't familiar with the Venus sequence, it is part of the Gene Keys Golden Path. And in June this year, Richard Rudd is going to be um, taking us through this next voyage into the Venus sequence, which works with ages from 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, our core wound, our vocation, our chemistry, our archetypal journey that we go through these ages. And so that gathering in the field of Venus is going to be just this beautiful little free gathering for you to come into the beauty in the field. Whether you come on and journey into the Venus and the Bees, which is our little container that will go alongside the Venus sequence, or you just come to be humming in this nectar with us. We would love to invite you in, and we will have the gorgeous details of when that's happening in the show notes and the speaker page. And yeah, it's just been such a honor to buzz with you, each of you, and cross-pollinate our wisdoms together, our joys, the depth, like you said, the depth. And just to add to that, Stacey, who said I've done a lot of work on myself, and the Gene Keys has been very instrumental. Gene Keys, astrology, and co-creation have been instrumental on me transmuting some very deep, dark shadows. Mm.
I did want to mention that one thing about the Venus sequence, and you just gave me that perfect opportunity that this really is, I will say, on that journey from inheritance to intimacy, the parts that are uniquely ours, meaning that our charts are, what is encoded in us is this particular set of keys. I know of no other system that helps us do that work to become more truly intimate, because that intimacy, we first have to become intimate with who we really are, not who we've thought we are, but who we actually are. And that's why it's called our shadow, because it's not something that is out in front of us. Um, and so we have to become more intimate with who we truly are. And it's through then that we can become more intimate in our relationships, our romantic relationships, and but relationships in general, because that intimacy with our, the kind of all the different basement levels of our inheritance. Um, that's that intimacy is actually the most important intimacy for us to be able to be truly intimate with anybody else. Because if we're hiding things from our own selves, by definition, we're hiding them from others as well. So the Venus sequence, I think, lays it out in a way that it's so incredibly powerful, and it's also so gentle. That's what I find so interesting about it, is it's so deeply um like like it's Venus. I mean, that's the thing, is it's a feminine, it feels like you're in the archetype of the mother as you're looking at some of the most difficult stuff about you. And that's, I think, what makes it feel so accessible, is that it feels like you're held. So yeah, it's really incredible.
Mm.
Well, Viv, would you love to just close us off before Stacy just closes our beautiful container today with another sacred poem?
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much, Stacey. That's so beautiful to end on that. To end on this coupling of beauty and mother as in my language with body dreaming, it would be like the resource that supports us to do that work. And that it's so essential, isn't it? Um, to have that while also doing that gritty work with the shadow. So, and I hope everyone out there hears that when relating to midlife too, because it's not just like toughing it out. There's such a requirement for orienting to beauty and being held and to ancestry and to the things that support us in order to go through these metamorphosis. I was going to say transition, and I was like, not transition, metamorphosis. So
Mm.
thank you so much, Stacey, and my co-weaver Kathleen, and I will invite Stace to share her beautiful last poem.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. And I would even go as far as to say, I think that gentleness and compassion is the key. I think that nothing reveals itself without that, that even if there are things that we see, we can't integrate them without feeling held by something bigger. So I love that you just ended us there, because that is such a huge part of how we can reorient, is to really deeply feel that, not just know it if we even did before. A lot of people don't, but to really feel that resourcing and that holding. So yes, thank you so much. It has been such a joy to be with you both. I'll say that now, so I'm not saying it after the poem, but thank you both so much for this beautiful co-creative container. I love that you did it together. That was like my favorite thing when I first saw the invitation. And just thank you so much for inviting me. I am so honored, so, 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 so honored to be with both of you, incredible, wise women, but also these incredible people who are on this summit too. It's just, I feel so honored and fortunate to have been able to put my voice into something so sacred and beautiful. So thank you.
Oh, wrapping you three who are here, and also wrapping all of our audience, our listeners as well into this magic, as well as all the other speakers who, like, as we've seen, Viv and I, this thread that is woven through each of the speakers, and it feels like this is beyond anything that we even can tangibly put a finger on. It's definitely something greater and orchestrated divinely. metaphorically and metamorphosy.
Exactly. Yes.
Made up
Thank
a
you for
word, but yeah.
creating this space for it to happen. Thanks, you guys. Okay, I'm going to read this beautiful poem, which is actually about nature. So it's perfect that we ended where we did. Okay, this gorgeous poem, which hopefully I won't cry when I'm reading it to you, but it's okay if I do. It is called Lost by David Wagner. Okay, Lost. Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger. Must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to Raven. No two branches are the same to Wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you.